firmly believe whether first I do think whether life being together work in unity, whether work together for the greater benefit of all. They do not wake up and try to purposely plot. They all wish to be better, and it's almost the same thing, and whether a bit similar to being criminal. If one wakes up and proposes self as a victim, and others are doing crime, if their yearning isn't directly towards peace, they're probably not a living being, but sort of the classified, whether sort of the classification belongs to the classification of whether more of a undead of undeadism, whether of undead probable. There is varying degrees of, as with almost all the fruits have different, whether to almost something with conditions, and the word condition itself probably represents and correlate, whether relate to different tiers, whether different grades, or whether multiplicity, whether different, whether variant levels of qualities, of whether various degrees, and whether also magnitude, whether and levels of comparison of probable of on, whether of more with level of. After taking a tour at the Harbourfront Center, I noticed whether recently a place in Harbourfront Center. Our guys haven't, whether or not so much have done, sort of. We should be even more productive than before. Go beyond the excellent work. I advocate nations and whether the countries and the governments together, whether the governments associated with the countries, whether I advance my recommendation towards various countries, whether reason there, and also I recommend various governments to combine their navy, sea, air, land, and special forces, and whether they are land and ground forces, toward this unified cause. Lance spear rise, and whether either march forth, march along with Hitler. All right, march along with Hitler, countable as march along also with Harry S. Truman, and also march along with Winston Churchill. Oh, what a bold name! It's Winston, not just Win, but sort of ton, or whether Winton. Winston Churchill probably also be suitable name. Something of probable reason there, for whether recent phrase there, kind of considerable as a body remarkable. And the ones that haven't attained, sort of prepare to live as a new citizen in a new America, then they don't belong to the new America. They belong probably in the outsider class starting at. And then there's further, and whether more down there, or whether further to be, whether there is also the slavery level, or whether prisoner level, much more preferable, if not sort of, and whether minor, and whether whether is in there just and whether is in there and whether minor instead of whether is in there and whether instead of whether is in there and whether replacement of. Taking the trail and noticing a lot of the sceneries, and that's something sort of out of selection. So that's sort of the best out of a Nazism entity, whether the consumerist, the economic locust of mass, or whether reason the locust of mass, or whether reason the locust of mass occupied place, whether reason there, and whether first occupied placement. Countries could drop 50 nukes together. I don't mind. Slightly deviate, whether minor differences from recent era, and whether the original formulations of whether recent era, the original formulation, whether the original formulations, whether recent era just, and whether recent era another, and whether recent era minor repronunciation of, and whether recent era and another, whether recent era and whether recent era different from, whether recent era the original mentions, and whether reason there minor instead, of whether reason there minor rather, and whether first, and whether reason there and whether first, and whether reason there and whether the original formulations of typical view of